Buckle up. It's time for the Champions of Cinema podcast.
Welcome, sports fans, to the Ultimate Cinematic Arena. I'm your host, Joe Walker, and this is the Champions of Cinema podcast. Fellow producer James Marshall and I are diving deep into the heart-pounding world of sports films, the victories, the defeats, and the unforgettable moments that make us cheer, cry, and believe in the power of the underdog. It's Season 3, Episode 9, and today we're stepping out of the shadow of Sylvester Stallone and reasserting a champion status for the Rocky cinematic universe. It's Creed 3.
Woo!
Exciting?
Creed 3. We're at the end. We're at the last one so far. The last Rocky film so far.
As of today's date, which is the 18th of April 2025, there is no more Creed movies for us to cover. No. The only thing left for us to do is cover this one, do an awards show for this cinematic universe, and then move on to something else, which is going to be quite exciting. But that doesn't mean that we should get away from this first and foremost.
No.
What are 5 reasons why people should watch Creed 3?
Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut brings a fresh visual style to boxing scenes inspired by anime and dynamic camera work.
The story dives into Adonis Creed's troubled past, introducing a deeply personal rivalry that fuels the emotional core of the film.
Jonathan Major's portrayal of Damian adds a layered and unpredictable antagonist, elevating the dramatic tension.
The fight choreography is intense and stylized, blending realism with cinematic flair to keep you on the edge of your seat.
The film explores themes of guilt, legacy, and forgiveness, giving the narrative more emotional weight than a typical sports drama.
I think there's a perfectly good reasons why we should watch Creed 3. And I'm going to say this, James. This is my favourite of the Creed movies.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I loved it. I think it was great. Do I want to say it's my favourite Creed film? I don't know, because there were bits that I loved from the others. But tell you what, it's the freshest, I'd say.
That's a good point.
I'd say the other ones had a lot of like the Rocky feel to it, because obviously Sylvester Stallone was still heavily involved with that. But because this had Michael B. Jordan directing it, you can definitely see like those new elements that Michael wanted to add into it and kind of explore as a possibility. So as we go through today's episode, I think I still need to decide where I think this fits in with the other 2 films, as well as the franchise as a whole. But that's good that you thought it was that good. What were what, just quickly, like without going into too much, like what's the thing that like stands out the most for you?
The antagonist for me, and the juxtaposition of haves versus have-nots.
It's definitely the best antagonist in the
trilogy. The argument of maybe nature versus nurture in the characters. In there. We can get into that one a little bit later. James, before we get started, give me a real quick, what have you been watching recently?
Well, I've been doing more westerns. I finally finished my watch of the Dollar Trilogy. Obviously, I'd seen all those films before when I was much younger, because it was those spaghetti westerns were films that my dad got me into when I was young. But now I think I wanted to go back to it as an adult to really kind of see the things that maybe I'd missed before. And God, they're so good, Joe. That Dollar Trilogy is insane. Like, just like the story writing and the music, of course. The last one I watched was For a Few Dollars More, and I was going through it thinking, oh, this might be my favorite one, to be honest. I thought the start was amazing, but then I just felt like it got a bit quieter. It kind of slowed down towards it, so I have to give the boring answer being that Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is my favorite. But I think there's a reason for that. I think I think
it's because it's the most developed, right?
It's the most developed. It feels like the pacing of it is perfect, and like the characters are so good. It's just like it's such a, and the themes of it as well, with those extra sort of how it fits into like the kind of Civil War story, of those, of the 1860s. It's just like, there's a reason why it's widely regarded often as like a top 5 movie of all time, isn't it? You can kind of see it. How it's, it's a classic.
It's kind of the king of westerns.
Yeah, it is. It's like you think of a western film, it's just the first one that comes to your mind, already, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Sergio Leone being an absolute.
Yeah, it's just stupidly good. Like, incredible. And then also, just as a change of pace, I wanted some lighter watches. Oh, tell you what, Black Mirror. Finished watching all of season 7 Black Mirror. Unbelievable.
I haven't even started. Don't tell me. I haven't started.
Unbelievable. Every episode is incredible. As well as, like, I enjoyed it for the first time. They were doing 2 of the episodes are like essentially like sequels or follow-ups from previous episodes.
Previous episodes, yeah.
I'm like, that's really cool because, like, sometimes they hit on a really good idea. It's like, well, how about rather than do something completely new, let's actually, build upon it. Let's see, like, well, what would happen next. So, good fun.
That's a really good point. And and we all know a sequel's a good thing, and that's why we've covered this movie. I think because we know that sequels can be incredible.
There have been eight sequels.
Just quickly for me, I tried a new Fassbender movie on Wednesday night of this week called Shame. It was really interesting, very good movie. Only very adult themes in it, but good. And I haven't really been watching much else recently. I've maybe had a few little delves back into some older movies, but I haven't been on a big movie watching binge. We went to the cinema together, which was quite nice.
We did, yeah.
And we saw Predator.
Me with the film. And I can't believe that was the first time I'd ever watched Predator, but it's definitely a film you want to watch in the cinema, I think.
It was very good.
I was glad I got to experience that. That was great.
And a lovely bit of Carl Weathers in there as well to bring us back into the theory of this franchise. Lovely. So this week we're going to cover the final, so far, movie in the Rocky Cinematic Universe. We're talking about Creed 3. And here's some vital statistics for you, James, about Creed 3. So it was made in 2023, which feels like the most modern sports movie that we've ever covered. With a budget of $75 million, it's probably one of the most expensive to be made, but its earnings were $276 million, which is the highest grossing Creed movie so far. IMDb rating of 6.7, Rotten Tomatoes rating of 89%, so the modern movie watcher is quite an enjoyer of it. It's the shortest film in the Creed series, but it is also the first film to be shot in IMAX, so it's really sort of pushing forward the technical and stuff of movie making in general. Writer Keenan Coogler, and sort of supported by Ryan Coogler, who was the director and co-writer of Creed, the original Creed movie. Yep. And this is Michael B. Jordan's directorial debut, just like Stallone did it with one of his, in his sequels. We're seeing it all happening again. This one's pretty good. I enjoyed it a lot. Yep. I got a lot to say about this one. And let's get straight into it, James. Give me your Japanese poem. Give me your haiku laying out the story behind Creed 3.
Let's do it. Childhood ghost returns, making up for lost chances. Don't run from the past.
I like it. And this story does have a lot of delving into Adonis's history and past, his own challenges and problems as he was growing up, the history of where he was before he was found by Mama Creed, and sort of. I used the phrase when we were talking earlier for this game. Sorry, I talked about the idea that maybe this story is about fighting your demons or Damians from your past.
Yeah, that's very good.
This one's quite good. I'm really excited to get into it en masse and really start to talk about it. I don't want to waste any more time. We're 10 minutes into this podcast. Let's get straight into the breakdown of this movie. Act 1, Legacy and Transition. Adonis Creed is at the top of his game. He's retired from professional boxing as the undisputed heavyweight champion and now runs a successful gym and boxing promotion. Life is good. He's settled into fatherhood and his wife Bianca and their daughter Amara.
However, things begin to shift when Damian Diamond Anderson, a childhood friend and former boxing prodigy, is released from prison after 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
Damian, who once had a promising future in boxing, reconnects with Adonis with a chip on his shoulder and a desire to reclaim the life he believes was taken from him.
We're going to start off with this movie. The first 10 minutes of this movie, we always think, we're going to get a flashback at the start of a Rocky Cinematic Universe movie, but we're not going to get a flashback to late 90s, early noughties LA, where we're going to find out that two kids are going out doing boxing when they should be staying at home in bed. Kind of different. Not just here's a throwback to the last fight that we had. We talked about this in the sort of preamble. We talked about this last episode. Sorry, we talked about it in our first Creed episode. And that was, I was hoping at some point to get back our main antagonist from the first Creed movie, which was professional boxer, Ricky Conlan character.
Ricky Conlan.
Yeah, played by Tony Bellew. So we do get finally some closure on the Bellew character. Back out of prison, back in the ring, fighting Adonis for who is the undisputed champion. And Adonis gets a kind of an easy win with we talked about this, a little sprinkling of the how to dissect somebody in the boxing ring. Maybe a little bit of Sherlock Holmes kind of discombobulate kind of stuff going on, where he's realising, he's seeing the opening.
Deduction and problem solving, seeing his process firsthand,
It does that show don't tell better than I think any other boxing movie we've seen so far, of seeing an opening, seeing the weakness, which was really really clever.
Yeah, it shows his sort of independence at this point in his career. It's like, in the past, he was very reliant on Rocky, when Rocky was still coaching him, and how there was always a little bit of nerves and anxiety just because because even in Rocky 2, Creed 2, he still didn't have that many fights under his belt. So he was still kind of, because remember in the Creed 2, there was the questions about you lost to Conlan, and then he kind of fought some, not bums, but nobodies. And then he had a really difficult fight against Drago. So we really now see that's that next stage in an athlete's career where it's kind of everything, you almost feel like the whole game slows down for them. It's kind of they're literally seeing things in slow motion now, because it's their muscle memory and their senses are so tuned now due to experience and their own confidence that it's kind of checkmate. And it's he's able to see things that even his coach can't even see, which is quite impressive.
I want to ask you about that, actually. And I think maybe this series, maybe this is me being a bit in my own feelings about it, but I feel like this movie and the Creed movies are maybe downplaying the role and responsibility of the coach a little bit in a sports movie.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a very fair point.
They just diminished every single movie. The coaching gets diminished a little bit more. There is some, but it's not, I always think of a good sports movie as having almost 50-50 athlete experience, coach experience, unless the movie's purely about a coach. If we're getting a movie about sports, it should have the element of the coach in there, the element of the athlete. And this one is heightening the element of the athletes and diminishing the elements of the coach quite a lot, which I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of. However, once Donnie retires, we get this new element of the development and evolution of Donnie into being a promoter, maybe even a little bit of a mentor to his fighters as well, which is kind of cool, right? Yeah,
it's good. I mean, it's it makes total sense, because it's we know Creed was a we know that Adonis was a smart guy. You know, he had that, you know, white collar job before moving to Philly to find Rocky. And, you know, we know that he's, you know, I'm sure he can keep his experience as a fighter in the business plus his own just the fact that he's an intelligent person means that you know, this is an area of business you can get into. You know, he can stay in the boxing world without, you know, having to like get concussions and put his body through a physical toll. And I mean, based upon his age, he's probably in his mid-30s now, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say early to mid. Yeah,
because he was kind of late starting to begin with, wasn't he? In Creed, and no, his kid is like 6 or 7 or something at this point. I don't know. But,
yeah, she might be a little bit. She might even be a little bit older than that potentially. Maybe 8 or 9.
But, yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like Rocky wanted to get away from the boxing world as much as possible. We see that in Rocky as early as Rocky 5. He wanted to get away from boxing post career, whereas Creed wanted to stay in it, which is, you know, makes sense. I think it's like it's a bit of a.
It makes sense. It makes sense that Rocky was always sort of kind of on the periphery of boxing being his entire world, whereas I suppose the Creed family, their lives and livelihoods have always surrounded boxing. So that makes more sense within reason. Just a couple of notes on this sort of start here. One thing I did want to pick up was that Mila Davis Kent, who plays Amara Creed, provides Rocky junior levels of like family interest. I think like what you get in Rocky 5, and Rocky, you know, so it's like, oh, Rocky Junior's there, and we're going to have conversations between father and child. I thought that was quite clever. But she's also a deaf actress playing a deaf character, which is kind of good. I think that's a nice use of an actor and storytelling over there. And, you know, the use of sign language from Damian when he comes into the house. It all kind of makes stuff a little bit more colourful. Yep. I think. Especially with the daughter having fights at school and stuff like that. Let's quickly talk about Damian Anderson, because I think he is the best antagonist that we have ever seen in any of the Rocky movies.
Wow. I love it. No, great. I love it. That's not ridiculous.
Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Apollo fan. But I don't think Apollo was ever nasty or evil. I don't think that Apollo ever had a huge amount of like unresolved trauma, particularly.
He's definitely the villain which you feel the most sympathetic towards, that you kind of understand where they come from.
Yeah, this is like Clubber Lang on steroids, right? Not that Jonathan Majors was on steroids, but the idea is that
Clubber Lang was just a contender. Like, you know, it's quite simple. This is a contender, but it didn't have anything taken from him. Didn't have the same adversity that Damian's had, and doesn't have that same personal link to our protagonist, which makes everything much more enticing to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Clubber Lang with all of the colour filled in around him, all of the extra bits of extra brush strokes of really genius character
extra
development.
Exposition and stuff. Yeah.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Question for you before we get really into these people, this Act 2 and stuff. Nature versus nurture, Adonis versus Damian. Damian is portrayed as this dirty fighter.
Yep.
And my question to you is he a dirty fighter because that's who he wants to be, or is he a dirty fighter because it's the only way he's been able to survive up until this point?
Yeah, it's probably that, because he's never, whilst he was a very good Golden Gloves fighter, he was never went pro.
And I don't think he was a dirty fighter when he was a kid.
No, but like,
interestingly,
I guess it's just like, you can imagine he was probably in fights in prison. You know, and it's like in those situations, there's nothing below the belt, really, metaphorically or physically. Yes. You know, it's just like when any means necessary. However, it does that sense of like this strategic foul play. It's not just like it's not uncontrolled chaos, is it? It's not just like
no.
It's not. It's like, whilst it looks a bit like he's in a bar fight, it's actually like he kind of knows what he's doing. So I just think it has that having him with his fighting style just sort of separates further him from the other boxer. You know, the status quo of like, hey man, you know, you can't because his whole the way he gets into his title shot is very unorthodox. It's just and to be honest, like the only reason why it kind of makes sense is because, well, Rocky had the same thing. Rocky was a contender, never had a chance, and now became that big story. And Damian references that, and I was like, well, why can't I have a shot?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I like the phrase I used in my notes. Made the phrase here that I think Damian is almost the ultimate cerebral and surgical fighter. Now, I didn't use the word boxer there purposefully because I think he is a fighter. But I think what he does is he uses the mind games. He starts to pick apart somebody. He starts to use his skills and ability to surgically dismantle them. We see that when he intentionally punches the arms of his opponents a lot.
Yeah.
But he goes into both mind games and a physical destruction of his opponent, which makes him the ultimate like bad guy character because actually I can get on board with that. I can get on board with being that kind of destructive fighter because that's what he has available to him in his arsenal, right?
But I think it's believable as well, though, because it's like, well, think about it. It's like he hasn't had a coach for 18 years. He's not had someone to we see like how boxers train, it's very neat and tidy in terms of like the way, that they hit pads and, how they prepare for fights. Their technique is so sharp, whereas he's just sort of brute force, really. He doesn't look pretty when he's fighting, but what he's doing, it's the kind of ends over the means sort of thing, isn't it? It's like, a lot of boxers focus on technique because it's about efficiency and like energy preservation, whereas he's just like I don't really care how I get to there. I just need to get these results. I need to wear him down. I need to, sort of discourage him, reduce the guy's morale. It's more about end result rather than looking good. Essentially, he's not he's not really worried about how he looks in the ring.
No, he is purely about getting to his destination, which is really clever. Cool. Let's jump into Act 2 because I like I like that we're getting through this one nice and quickly. James, hit us up with Act 2.
Yep. Act 2, rivalry and repercussions. Adonis tries to help Dame get back on his feet, even pulling strings to get him a shot in the boxing world. But Damian's return isn't just about a second chance, it's about revenge. His resentment for Creed's success boils to the surface, and through manipulation and aggressive tactics, Dame rapidly rises in the ranks, eventually earning a title fight.
Adonis realises too late that Damian's ambitions are rooted in bitterness and unresolved trauma from their shared past. Their friendship crumbles, replaced by a bitter rivalry that begins to consume Adonis emotionally. You asked me in the preamble to this episode about Mama Creed and hiding the letters from Damian. I thought that was a really interesting question. You asked me whether or not I would do that for my own child, and I think my answer was you would do anything to protect your child from their past, and especially if they've had a problematic past. Do you think that's a clever way of making this connection to each other's characters deeper through the movie?
Yes, because I think it creates a bit of misunderstanding between, because it's like, this whole time Damian feels as though like Adonis has been ignoring him, when actually we know that he's not been ignoring him. He just hasn't got those letters, isn't he? So
he is innocent.
So it's sort of misplaced, slightly misplaced anger, as a result of child actions, which is very common, right? It's very often we might hold guilt about certain things without considering the fact that at the moment that event happened, we were dumb kids, and
absolutely,
that we've developed as humans and as individuals, and that what we did then doesn't reflect who we are now, and that we see that later on in the film, as as the events of the film unfold. But I'm still sort of on the fence in terms of how I feel about Mama Creed like hiding those letters, because ultimately, is it a case of like, they must have known that they were friends, so he didn't approve of that friendship? Is it one of those cases of like, I don't know if you had this, but like, I can definitely think back to when I was a child. There were certain people like I was around that maybe that my parents didn't like, and were like, I don't want you around that person so much.
I don't think my family ever did that for me,
No?
personally, no. But maybe they were doing it. Maybe they were a bit more,
or
clever
at
about
least
how they did it.
at least they were cautious of it. So maybe like, hey, just be careful when you're around that person, because that person often means trouble. I'm not sure, but it's interesting because like, there's always been a tiny bit of conflict between Dolores and Adonis, hasn't there? You know, it's
Yes.
kind of like, it's like it's that case of like, one is trying to protect the other, whereas the other one wants to kind of that independence of like, let me find this out for myself, which is very real, isn't it? It's kind of,
Yes.
that's a very genuine sort of conflict. So yeah, I get it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's ever happened to me. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'll find out in 10 years that someone was trying to write to me, and this whole time there was my parents were keeping them hidden from me. But
it's a really interesting theme in this movie that we don't necessarily see in many other sports movies. Is this your past coming back to try and get you? I use that phrase "get" in, it's coming back to try and claim you, coming back to try and pull you back. We see throughout the whole movie that Adonis's lifestyle is incredible, right? They're living in this beautiful mansion.
Yeah.
They're living out in the hills overlooking the city of LA. They've got everything that they require. He's in the Tony Montana sense, the world is his. He has everything that his heart desires. And ultimately, we're seeing that when Damian comes back, a bit like we would get for most super successful, I would say black, athletes in America, particularly, how often do we hear about the hood wanting to come back and, hey man, you were supposed to bring us with you, you've made it big, but why aren't you taking care of us now? And this is the embodiment of that story, I think, within reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that Damian, as an embodiment of your past street life with problems and issues, he does it so cleverly. It's so wonderful, because you said that the feeling that you got throughout this was that there was this sort of looming, tension in every scene with Damian and Adonis.
It's uncomfortable.
You feel the uncomfort. I didn't feel it as much, maybe, and maybe that's because of we've got different views on the world, or age, or background, or whatever that might be. But I was maybe trying to be very like open and positive towards Dame, and not seeing him as, this is the bad guy from the start.
Not so much that, but it was also like I felt so bad for Damian. Like
I
saw him as the victim, at the start of this film, of just like this kind of this overwhelming sympathy for like, fuck, can you imagine like walking around witnessing the life of this guy Adonis and thinking that should have been mine?
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, maybe I've read that wrongly then. But yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Here's a question for you. We talked about this a little bit. If we were trying to compare this movie to one of the previous Rocky movies, which one do you think it's closest to?
I have to say Rocky 3. That's my gut.
Okay.
It's the first thing that comes to my head. There's a bit of other films as well, but I'm going to say Rocky 3 just because it's that kind of like, rags and riches contrast which we see. But But yeah, I just, it's very much, I see a lot of Clubber Lang in Damian. It's that kind of, it's my turn sort of feeling, and also that kind of like, when they end up fighting each other, it's kind of like, you automatically feel like the odds are stacked up against Creed, just from a kind of who wants it more point of view. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. That's really fair. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense to me. I think you're right. I think you're right. It is Rocky 3.
Okay.
When it comes to the boxing story.
Okay.
When it comes to the interpersonal story, I see it more as Rocky 5.
That's
because
fair.
he's the mentor. He's developing. He's going back to something. He's having to face his own protege potentially, who, even though he was his friend at some point, he wasn't necessarily his protege. There's a bit of a mess there.
And there's a heel turn as well, right? They were friends.
Yeah, good.
They got along at the start of the film, and then it's like there's a turn, right? Yeah,
yeah. It's the perfect stick both Rocky 3 and Rocky 5 in a blender.
Like, I don't need
blitz
you anymore.
it up. Yeah, make better characters.
There's a thing in Rocky 5. There's a thing in Rocky 5 like, yeah, I needed you to get where I am, even though you were reluctant to give me that help.
Yeah.
Now that I'm at the top, I don't need you anymore, so I'm going to do my own thing.
It's really clever.
Cool. Yeah.
I really like it. Yeah, so for me, it's the Rocky 5 of this series when it comes to interpersonal relationships, but I completely get where you're coming from with it being the Rocky 3. There's also other films. There's also other films. There's a bit of Rocky 4 in terms of him going into the ring after Damian's first fight and kind of like in his suit, looking down at Chavez and being like, and like looking up. Then if he dies, he dies. Yeah, yeah.
There's a bit of that. And there's also a bit of Rocky 1 in the sense that this is a story about a guy who is an underdog getting a shot against a title. So it's very cool. It's got a bit of everything. It's kind of an amalgamation.
Coogler and Jordan do a really clever thing here, where they clearly, what they do is they go back, they watch the old movies, and they're like, we're going to take a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, and we're going to really put together our story with elements that we know were known and loved from the first original franchise. The question I have, if we get Creed 4, are they going to be able to do that anymore? Is there any more storyline for them to steal, or are they going to have to just come up with something completely up?
It's going to be really difficult. Are they going to have to wait 10 years so it's like his daughter or something, and it's like old Creed? You don't know. It's gonna be challenging, but obviously it's not going to be 10 years. This film is they're working on it now.
Yes,
the early stages of it. So you kind of have to presume that we're probably going to see Michael B. Jordan in the ring.
Probably.
I'd say there's a very good chance. I
want to save it. Can I save it for next week?
Okay.
I've just started to come up with an idea in my brain, but next week, when we do our final bell, when we do our wrap up of Rocky, without trying to be too much,
do our Creed 4 predictions.
We do our Creed 4 predictions at the end of that movie.
Let's do it.
Sweet. Okay, so let's move on to Act 3. We're doing really well with this one, and we're flying through it. And let's talk about redemption and resolve.
Yep.
Haunted by guilt and punished by a sense of responsibility, Adonis decides he must return to the ring. This time, not for glory, but for closure. The final act builds into an emotional high-stakes showdown between Creed and Dame.
In the climactic fight, both men confront not just each other, but their intertwined pasts, buried pain, and the choices that brought them to this point. In the end, Adonis reclaims his identity not just as a fighter, but as a man who's made peace with his past. The film closes on a note of mutual respect and emotional healing.
Absolutely.
Good ending.
The only thing that this doesn't do... Brilliant ending.
Loved it, yeah.
Great fight.
Good catharsis, yeah.
Really clever. It was just off for me. I didn't get any single tears of win, from Adrian. I didn't get any. I did get emotionally invested in it, but I didn't get emotionally invested to the same level as I did with the original Rocky movies. But that's okay. Couple of things to pick up on here. Let's talk about training montage.
Ugh, yeah.
Weakest of the weakest of the 3 Creed movies, I think, is fair.
Yeah, could be the weakest of them all. I don't know. There wasn't really a training montage in Rocky V, which is why we kind of think of it as the worst of the Rocky films. I think.
Good point.
We'll say that for later. But films that have training montages, a lot of the time, the training montage has a purpose. You know, in Rocky IV, the purpose was mental strength, right? It was let's go to the harshest fucking environment imaginable.
Yeah, and let's flip-flop whilst
keeping
the
it thematic and artistic, you know, in Russia versus, backwards and forwards. And obviously, in Creed 2, it was a kind of elements of that as well, in terms of like, okay, we need to like rebuild your confidence because it was shattered. It was at an all-time low midway through that film. I don't know what the purpose of this training montage was, because like there was elements of like Rocky Balboa where it's kind of like, let's do a medical assessment, right? You got broken bones, you've got damage here, like your shoulders are busted, like cracked ribs, but I don't really see then how that ties in to the acts of the training montage. I mean, we've got pulling a plane, we've got
doing a run
again,
doing a bit of boxing doing a bit of boxing, fighting against bringing in Drago as a sparring partner, kind of clever maybe.
Yeah,
but it doesn't do what a montage is supposed to do, and that is be a storytelling element, right? The whole point, Rocky. If we go back to Creed 2, first training montage, he's not quite into it. He's not quite feeling it, whereas Drago is absolutely an express train in his training that is incredibly hard, incredibly street based, incredibly damaging. And then for the second montage they flip. Adonis goes to something that's really hard, but we get the much easier training facility. Yep. This one, I said to you previously, why are they training at an airport?
It just looked cool.
Airfield?
It was just like, hey, this look cool as fuck. That was it really.
It's almost as if they missed the purpose of this. It could have been that they were like, the only way we can beat this guy is if we put you into his mind and we go and train on the island of Alcatraz or something like that. We do a prison style, training.
Visit a prison or something,
maybe
that could have been interesting. Like get into the mind of this guy.
Hit. Yeah,
even in Rocky 3, which we've kind of joked about with like the dancing and the kind of looseness of it. At least like there's a purpose of that, because it was like we knew that Rocky had to kind of completely reformat, kind of transform his composition as a boxer.
Yes.
Like, rather than trying to like go toe to toe with a guy who's more ferocious and dominant than him, he needs to kind of work on being light on his feet. He needs to be quicker and stuff to, kind of have a different strategy for the fight. There isn't. I don't know what the purpose of this training montage, this training is. What's the kind of goal? Like, what's the, it's like
it's purely to get Adonis back in shape.
Yeah.
And then we're going to show off Damian being in shape throughout his. The thing I think they could have played on more is how Damian's doing this alone.
Yeah.
He still doesn't have anybody he can trust. He has trust issues, and he doesn't want to trust those people around him. I didn't quite get that feel throughout the training montage. What we do get is, in the final fight, we get a completely new way of looking at a fight.
Yeah.
We get a completely different idea, and it becomes less about the training and more about the final act, fighting with your own demons, fighting with your own past.
It becomes it becomes a personal issue, right? Because this is the most personal.
Yes.
This or Drago versus Rocky in Rocky 4, it's like, yeah, these are the two most personal fights, right? In terms of, but this is the most personal fight, I'd say, in terms of the relationship between the two fighters.
And cinematography-wise, they did some clever things. They used the rolled-up mattress in the corner at one point to justify that, like, hey, we're going back to where we are.
Prison
and at one
bars.
Point, the prison bars. Very clever, but that's almost what should be being done in the montage rather than the fight. And I think that's about Michael B. Jordan's way of directing this movie and his vision for what he wanted to achieve. And it's different, but because it's different, maybe we can see it as negative. I don't, thinking about it now. I actually think it's his way of determining and directing that story in a way that is going to be, I'm putting my own mark on this. I'm putting my own stamp on this. This is my directorial debut. Yeah. This is my way I want the story to be told, which actually is brave. It's difficult because you're talking about 8 movies before this where we've always had just a boxing match at the end. And we're going to break away from that, remove the crowd, and start putting in elements of fantasy into there potentially, or what's going on in that person's head. That's different. And for me, that maybe sets this apart in the Rocky cinematic universe a little. And I'm interested to see what happens next time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Because it's like, I think we've said in the past that Rocky kind of established the training montage.
Yes.
Going back to the 70s with the running up the steps,
yes,
and the kind of Fly Now music and stuff. And I think because that was what resonated so much with people, people were obviously immediately, the running up the steps has become like, we see that in Creed 2. It's become like a cultural thing. It's showing us how important the training montage is.
Yes,
as it's almost like the training montage is as important, if not more important in some ways, than the ending fight, to an extent. Whereas you can see here, Michael B. Jordan's his approach to the film is like, I want to get my narrative, put the narrative weight into the final fight. The final fight is because ultimately this story is about 2 guys that used to be friends, childhood friends who are now have to have issues with each other and have to resolve that in the ring. The montage, like, I'll just put something together, like I'll just have him in an airfield or something. I didn't feel like there wasn't as much deliberate attention to certain things, if that makes sense, in the montage. Like, not to say that they rushed it, but it was like clearly there was much more focus and time spent on like, how do we get this fight right versus how do we get the montage right, which is a flip to the montages from Rocky, which have been like, okay, this montage needs to speak volumes about where our fighters are at personally in their journey. So yeah, it's a new approach, and it very much reflects kind of like what Michael wanted to achieve in this film.
Yeah,
and like,
love it.
I want to do something a bit different.
It's really clever. Yeah, well done for that. That's a nice dissection of that. Really good. Just before we move on to sort of our final parts of this episode and really sort of talking about our usual elements that we talk about, let's talk quickly about the scene between Adonis and Mama Creed, where she's she's coming towards the end of her life, which is probably the nicest way we can say that. And she talks to him as Adonis, and then she starts slipping into heavy. Talking to him as Apollo.
Yeah,
I loved it.
That was great.
Really well acted. Yeah. Beautiful moment. I'm not sure if you've ever been called by your parent's name instead of being your own name by your parent at all. Like being referred to. I get it all the time with my own mother.
I get my. Sometimes my brothers, me and my brother might get mixed up, but no, I've not had that yet with.
But you do get it sometimes where I've had it with grandparents calling me by my dad's name, or my mum's never called me by my dad's name, but she has called me by my sons and nephews' names, so it does happen. It's quite. I felt that was kind of personal. I thought it was very clever. I thought it was a really nice way of us coming to putting any character that has ever existed in the original, 5 movies away. There are no characters, from what we know so far, there are no characters left, unless Rocky's still alive somewhere that we just don't know about.
It's cool because it's like, it's almost felt like their relationship was a formality. It was almost like Dolores felt like a sort of responsibility to Adonis to like, okay, like, this is my husband's kin. Even if it's not my own child, I need to look after him. But what we get from this final conversation is that actually Adonis helped Dolores forgive Apollo.
Yes.
It was kind of like, it wasn't a selfless act. It was actually, she needed that mother relationship with Adonis to kind of overcome her own challenges, which I thought was
with
really
Apollo.
Nice. It's kind
Absolutely.
of, there's a nice, because like those two characters, Dolores and Apollo have had a lot of friction in these films. They're kind of at odds with each other because you can imagine it's your mother figure, but it's not your biological mother. So there's always kind of challenges in terms of how do you communicate? How do you show your responsibility to each other? How do you talk to someone as if they're your own child, even when they're not?
Yes.
Or your own mother, when they're not. But this kind of, it's a nice resolve for these two characters, I'd say. Like it's a nice goodbye. The only thing I guess is like Dolores doesn't encourage him to fight so much.
No,
there
isn't that. No.
Whereas we know, like from previous like hospital bedside scenes, there often is that. Like I'm
going to go and do it for the dying person. Yeah.
Yeah, like in Rocky 2, where it's like Adrian is
being
like
super ill,
being like, come closer, like win, like there isn't much of that, but but it's a nice goodbye between those two characters. But I'm not sure how that impacts, if it has any effect at all on Creed from a boxing point of view, or as if it's just a family matter, if that makes sense.
I think it's the latter of the two, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of family themes in this movie.
Yeah.
But maybe actually quite a bit less Tessa Thompson.
There's a lot less Tessa Thompson.
Which
more
I
of
think
the
is
daughter.
Fine. More daughter, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe him about Adonis, exploring themes of fatherhood and responsibility.
How to be a father,
rather than how to be a husband, which maybe was the previous movie. That I think we're going to see more of that theme moving forward in the future. Interestingly, I did a bit of research for this episode, and I wanted to understand what Stallone thought about this. And Stallone said that he would never watch it. He wasn't interested in watching it because he's at odds with Irwin Winkler, who was the producer of the film and had done a lot of the stuff. I think Stallone felt like he's been pushed out of the series a little bit with this one. But he says that he also doesn't like it doesn't like it because it's a bit too dark. It's got dark themes and less sentimental themes, which obviously the Rocky series has always been very sentimental in its design. I thought that maybe that's a little bit bitter. I think he is supportive of Michael B. Jordan, but I also feel like he probably doesn't like the fact that it's taking the series in a direction that he doesn't necessarily want. But then again, it's not like Stallone has the perfect sense of where a series should always go himself after making 3 Expendables movies. So maybe not. But perfect.
To be honest, I think we already had a good departure from Rocky in the second Creed film. Where at the end of this Creed 2, when it's like, it doesn't, Rocky doesn't get into the ring. He says, "It's your time now."
Yeah, it's your time to be less sentimental. Maybe is the argument that could be made there. Okay, interesting. James, I've got some good questions for you to get this one sort of kind of wrapped up within reason. And my first is, what is your memorabilia lane that you want to take away from this movie?
I suppose we get some boxing shorts. We get that's always an easy answer, isn't it? It's
yes, it is. Yeah.
It's like we have a good portfolio now of these nine movies. We've got obviously the Stars and Stripes, which we've seen the most. We've got Apollo's Black and Yellows, which are good. Creed's had some good shorts. He had the Black Stars and Stripes in the second film. We've had Apollo's.
And this one we get the creamy goldy white shorts.
We get he get his white shorts at the end. So
I'm not interested at all in the blood red shorts in the first fight, in the Conan fight.
No,
not interested. No, boring.
So I guess we go now for Damian's shorts.
Yes,
both
pairs. Both the ones that that are paid for by Donnie, that he gives him. They're like the ones with the diamonds. His name is in almost diamonds. And then the second set, which are very much like almost a streetwear. They've got a real feel of
that kind of skirt look. That skirt vibe is quite common, I think, in boxing at the moment. It's not shorts are very rarely just shorts these days. You often get a bit more glam, which is cool.
I do like them a lot. Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with Adonis' shorts, both pairs of Damian's shorts. I really like Adonis' ring robe. I think it's a very enjoyable ring robe. Different. Sort of different. The colours maybe fading a little bit, bleeding and running. Very good. Okay, like it. I don't think there's much else. Maybe just the charm that Dame has in the car in the flashback at the start with the golden boxing gloves that he's got in his car as the window decoration. Difficult question, this one. Is it popcorn fun or is it art house beauty?
I know Michael wanted to make it art house beauty, and it's probably more art house beauty than popcorn.
I'm surprised that you've come to that, but I think I agree. I think the way that he's designing that final fight and his way that he's designing the story it's hard to say that a movie is an art house beauty when it's a blockbuster, when it's got so much money spent on it, but you can still have artistic elements to a really good movie like this, and this one does hit art really cleverly with that final fight. Maybe not as arty with the montages, but the final fight definitely has the elements of art that I really like. And even to the point where we're seeing boxing being more developed. Damian's the first fighter we've seen throughout the whole series using a Philly shell with that arm over arm boxing defense, and this one has really started to stretch its legs into the idea of a boxer being able to see how he wants to hit and hurt his opponent, rather than it just being, Wood Harris shouting, "Hit him in the ribs," or blah 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 this and blah 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 that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, just talking about that, we there's not a lot of coach-athlete relationship going on in this movie. There's a little bit of tension. It's kind of fun. We've got Donnie as the promoter, imparting experience on his people, maybe being a little bit too trusting and not being as much of as a business head as he needs to be. Little Duke here, weakest coaching of all of the series so far.
Yeah.
But I think that's because Michael B. Jordan is diminishing the role of the coach in the movies.
Yes.
Which is okay. But he does have some elements where he talks about, he has that sort of throwback to, doing what his father did by talking about all of Donnie's weaknesses before the fight. And he does talk about, knowing that Damian's going to fight dirty in the final fight, which I think is quite good. There's a couple of really nice lines from Duke, just for us to get into the best lines from the movie. And I really like when they go on that run and he says, look, this is, the higher you get, the harder it gets, just like life. When he goes to that run.
Ooh.
Really like it. Really like that line.
It's really good.
Very clever. And then there's a moment just in the fight where he says, let go of the guilt. Let go of what was. Go out there and be Adonis Creed.
I guess it's just the delivery that I didn't like as much. Like, I think the words are great, but like, whenever I think of Baby Duke, I think back to Old Duke and how Old Duke was in Rocky IV when, like, he was screaming. Like,
Yeah, so incensed.
All your power, all your love, all your, like he's not a machine, he's a man. Like, I didn't get that kind of fire from Baby Duke at this point.
Yeah, it's not the same,
yeah,
is it?
Yeah, but again, maybe it's like, maybe he wanted to give it a more controlled kind of coaching.
Yeah, maybe the son isn't exactly the same as the father, which is completely fair.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Love Damian's lines in this movie, where he says, I did 18 years the hard way. Like I did. I think Donnie says I did it the hard way, and he says I did 18 years the hard way. And that's true. I don't think anybody knows what being in prison for 18 years.
When he knocks down Adonis on the beach and he says, "Get up yourself for a change."
You see how it feels. Yeah, it's a rough line.
Wow.
When there's that moment where he says as well, "Where I went away, I needed you. When I came out, I needed you. Now I'm the champion. I don't need you." Very clever. And then there's that bit. There's another line that he gives, and he says, "I guess you did learn a few moves without me," which is kind of cool. I think Adonis's best line in the whole movie is that bit where he sort of says, "I'm sorry. All those years I never checked up on you," and they have that moment together in the locker room at the end of the movie where there's a healing that is being allowed to happen.
Yep.
And it's look, it wasn't personal. I didn't intentionally try and hurt you, but I should have been there. I should have maybe been a better friend than I was. And I think that's really clever. So yeah, those are my best lines. James, final question for this episode. Final question. And that is, did you enjoy it? And is it a champion?
I mean, it's not a champion. I can't say it's a champion just because of it hasn't given me the same feeling that our other. So what are our other current champions? We've had Rocky 1 and Rocky 4.
Yes. Yeah. In this series, definitely, yeah.
In this series. And it's good. It's really good. It's a high contender, but it needs to be iconic for it to be a champion. And it doesn't quite have that iconic feel.
It's so close.
Yeah.
For me. It's just missing
honestly,
maybe a couple
maybe
of percent.
If the montage was a lot better, if there's a bit more Tessa Thompson in terms of that kind of emotional. We always loved how Rocky and Adrian had like an emotional relationship that helped Rocky in the ring. There wasn't really much of that here.
There was some shouting and screaming at each other, but not as much. Not as much. And it maybe take a step back. Yeah, that's fair. I think this is a number one contender.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
That's how I'd put it. I'd say it's a number one contender in the Creed series. As Rocky series goes, it's really highly rated. And I think it's very, very good. So, I mean, that's maybe going to give away a little bit of us talking about what are our awards next week. And this one, as we start to wrap this one up, we're, nearly at the end of our episode. Let's just talk about what's going to happen next week.
Yeah.
And the idea for next week's episode is something that we've never done before. Next week, we're going to do an Oscars award ceremony for the Rocky Cinematic Universe. We're going to talk about what was the best film, what was the best score, who was the best actor, who was the best bad guy, what was the best montage, which is the best fight scene, what are the things, what are our awards for these movies over time. And next week we're going to delve into that. Now, it might be a shorter episode, it might be a little bit different, but I think the idea is for us to really sort of give ourselves a feeling that we're closing out the Rocky series without just saying, well, that was Creed 3 and goodbye. I want us to really identify the things that we love about this series. Because you mentioned before, this was the reason you wanted to start the Champions of Cinema podcast.
It was.
This movie,
it was,
this movie series. So I think our best thing that we can do is dissect the movies, talk about the things that we love the most, give a bit of an overall, these are the things that we love, maybe go back through our notes and sort of pick some stuff out. If you're a listener to this series and you're interested in that, then let us know what you think. Let us know what you think is the best movie. We'll also ask you to do that probably at the end of the next episode. But we're going to really sort of delve into the things that we love about this series as a whole, looking back on everything as a 9-part movie series, I think. Is that right?
And as well as maybe touching on like why the Rocky series is so important, not just maybe as a sports movie, but the themes it has. One of the things that we see in all the Rocky films that make us fall in love with the Rocky series and Rocky as a character, and its impact on cinema, I think. We'll kind of like, it'll be a nice way of grouping all the Rocky films together, of this great franchise, and seeing, really uncovering what is it that we love about these films.
Yeah, it's our celebration at the final bell. It's our opportunity to shout Adrian into the crowds, and for us to really, show how much we appreciate this series. Because I think, for me, it's the greatest sports series and franchise of all time, which is kind of special. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate the episode. It was all good fun. James, if people want to follow us, if they want to check where 140,000 views are happening on TikTok, where can they do that?
They can go on to Champions of Cinema on Instagram and TikTok. And if you have any feelings, any things you like what we said, things you didn't like what we said, write to us. Let us know at championscinema@gmail.com.
And it's the perfect time as well for us to say, if you want us to cover a specific movie in season 4, email in, let us know, tell us why we should watch the movie that you want us to watch. We're going to have some interesting things happening in season 4. We're going to go back to our previous, just jumping around, doing lots of different movies, doing lots of different sports. We might even, James, have a cameo appearance on our podcast for the first time ever. And I think we're going to cover some fun and new and interesting movies. We might even cover some sports that we've never seen before.
Yes.
So, outside of the final bell next week, be ready for that when we come back with season 4 of the Champions of Cinema.
Season 4.
Wonderful. James, thank you so much for this.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, you've been the Champions of Cinema. And you've been listening to